As we look at flash or short fictions this week, a second story we can consider in terms of its singular effect on the reader is H.P. Lovecraft's From Beyond, which is not a one-page or two-page story, but you can think about how the story reframes the act of seeing for you here. Typically, Lovecraft's haunts kind of guide his way of seeing the world. As he writes in The Unnameable, the witch-haunted old town of faith in the existence of spectral substances on earth, deserted houses full of queer sentient things, old graveyards, psychically living dead things in shapes or absences of shape. So there's this other world that exists that Lovecraft wants to explore within and outside his native New England. And in the story From Beyond, we come face to face with things that are not in shapes of ghosts or witches, but things that are in the absence of shapes here. As I noted earlier in the course, right, that Lovecraft is very different from Poe in terms of his focus for horror. For Poe, horror exists within the human being, and uncovering that horror is the task of Poe's writing and short story. But instead, Lovecraft wants to focus on the outside arcane forces that define terror for the human being. As he writes, all my stories, unconnected as they may be, are based on the fundamental lore or legend that this world was inhabited at one time by another race who, in practicing black magic, lost their foothold and were expelled, yet on the outside are ever ready to take possession of this earth again. And so this boundary here that defines the control of the world is what defines horror in Lovecraft's writing. Where is this boundary crossed? Where is that boundary viewed by particular characters, and what is their response to viewing into that other world, or viewing through the boundary with that other world? A sense of dark matter here, both in the literary sense of horror and the physical sense of particles that we cannot see, is a preoccupation for Lovecraft, right? That the physical world that physicists say is only about, which only kind of is that our side of the physical world only is about 25% of what's really there. That there's this other world of dark matter and dark energy that defines the realities of the universe, and that we don't see these things. But Lovecraft's characters are kind of brought face to face with them in some ways throughout his tales. In From Beyond, the narrator has a feel here for the terror stalking in the shadows from the moment that he enters Crawford Tillinghast's house. And within all of Lovecraft's stories, we can ask the question of what's within the liminal spaces, the boundaried spaces, the spaces between of twilight, attic, and walls. What horrors are kind of crouched there for Lovecraft's characters? When the narrator looks into this world, he says there seemed to be a void and nothing more. But how does his act of seeing change through the course of the story? He's called to the home of his best friend Crawford Tillinghast in the beginning of From Beyond, and Tillinghast has invented this machine that allows him to see into these other dimensions. As Tillinghast will tell our narrator here, we see things only as we are constructed to see them, but might see and study whole worlds of matter, energy, and life, and now I believe I have found a way to break down barriers. So Tillinghast has invented this way to see through the boundaries that separate, the kind of waking world of reality, the sensible world of human beings, and to see into a deeper reality. He does this through this machine that drones on through the course of the story, that emits lights that allow these characters to see into that other world. and the machine itself disturbs our narrator. That he calls it a detestable electrical machine that drones on and on through the course of the story. You can make some connections within this story to Victor Frankenstein as well as a character, right? In what ways, like Frankenstein, does Tillinghast exhibit his own kind of brand of madness as he, sees into the world's possibilities and the world's realities here? The narrator will say that before I had protested his unnatural pryings into the unthinkable, that he had tried to distract Tillinghast from these observations or from these explorations. But now as he comes to the house, he sees Tillinghast as prey of failure, solitary, and melancholy in the past, but is now, prey of success, that he seems to have found some way to actually accomplish his scientific purpose, to see into this, unboundaried world, where, as Tillinghast will say, we shall overleap time and space and peer to the bottom of creation. So what does this act of peering gain Tillinghast? A kind of augmented sight, as he says, as he, brings the narrator into the light of the machine, into which they can see into the deeper aspects of the physical realities of this world. He explains to him that in these rays we are able to be seen as well as see. And so by being able to see into those other worlds, you suddenly have crossed over into a place where you can be seen by the creatures that inhabit those worlds. As Tillinghast warns him, though, but so long as we don't move, we're fairly safe. Keep still. So there's a great tension in the story, not about actually moving into insight, but into remaining as stock still as possible. As the narrator notes, as he tries to remain still, and in my terror, my mind again opened to the impressions coming from Tillinghast called beyond. Huge animate things brushing past me and occasionally walking or drifting through my supposedly solid body. He crosses over the boundary here, right? That he is able to observe these other things from other worlds moving through the physical reality of our own world, the things that we do not have access to through ordinary sight, but only through this kind of augmented sight. And so what is the response in the end but madness, right? Tillinghast himself, at the end of the story, feels disdain for the narrator, and looks at him as a coward. Have I not succeeded, he says, in breaking down the barrier? Have I not shown you worlds that no other living men have seen? You damned coward. Do you suppose there are really any such things as time and magnitude? I have harnessed shadows. Space belongs to me, do you hear? Things are hunting me now. Disintegration is quite painless. Look, 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 he commands the narrator. And the narrator himself, to try to avoid being driven mad by this world, fires his gun into the machine. And when he does, Tillinghast falls dead. And that's the conclusion of the story. The question within the story for me is, if you think about this as short fiction, is what is the ultimate kind of effect upon you as reader, and how does it cause you to see the world differently? In what ways does the horror that's kind of awakened within that, within the story, within the writing here, does it change your own act of seeing? Do you see differently? Do you look differently? Do you observe differently? As you stand still, do you see into the same horrors that Lovecraft fears in his fictions? It would be an interesting point of exploration for a one-page fiction here, to kind of think about the act of seeing, and how does refocusing your vision or refocusing your thought, how does it kind of open a new world of horror that's possible to the story? Thanks.